Okay, I guess this is working. Seems like it's working. I want to talk about the Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 of the United States Constitution. Naturalization and immigration. That has really become a touchy subject with a lot of people. Especially people that stand up for the Constitution and are against big government or against overreach of the United States government. So, you know, we've had some experiences here lately that has really brought this to the forefront. And I have debated people that I consider to be my constituents on this matter, and for whatever reason, I can't really get to the bottom of what they actually believe or saying. The only thing I can come up with is some of them are advocating, whether they'll say it or not, no borders. And that's where I get really confused. And I kept thinking that a lot of these people, or at least some of these people, will be able to figure it out on their own. But evidently, that's not what's happening. Some time ago, I had a debate with Gavin Sine on this very subject, and he just reduced his whole argument to rhetoric and name calling. And I like Gavin. Excuse me. I like him to this day. And we just don't see eye to eye on this. But again, I can't seem to get to the bottom. About that time, when you try to pin things down, the argument falls apart. Their argument for sure falls apart, and it goes nowhere. So I've been scratching my head a lot over this, because Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 is the naturalization and immigration clause. And I've looked at it historically. I have a book here, which I rely quite a bit on. It's called Our Country. This particular book goes all the way back to 1878. Okay? I'm going to read part of it to you. In the very back of this book has a Constitution. And it goes through the different clauses and sections and what they mean and their purposes. So, in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4, it says, to establish an uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws of the subject of bankruptcies. Okay, but I'm dealing specifically with to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. And it's got a footnote. It's tagged, and it's got a footnote. And it says, the power of naturalization was possessed by each state under the Confederation. There was such a want of uniformity of laws on the subject that confusion was already manifested when the people, by the Constitution, vested the power exclusively in Congress. Okay, hopefully that clears something up right there. I've looked up the definition of naturalization, definition of immigration. I don't see where the mystery is, you know. So, to those people that think that we should have open borders, I got to ask you a question. Does anybody have an inherent right to be in this country? Of course, people that are born here, that's a birthright. Okay, that is inherent right. Okay? If you don't have an inherent right to be in this country, then you got to go through some sort of process. And the interesting thing is that process is totally up to our government. And that makes perfect sense to me, just on a historical basis. But one of the things that they don't seem to factor in, those that just want open borders, or they don't want people to be have to have some sort of approval to be here, is they don't factor in the fact that Congress and the people can shut off those borders anytime they want. Okay? Because people outside of the borders, unless you've been born here, or if you have some sort of God-given right to be here, you don't have an inherent right. And so that you go through this process of naturalization and immigration, which I believe, at least now, is both vetting and educational. Okay? It's been described many times as a filter. Okay? And then when you put things through a filter, there are certain things you don't want in, certain things you do want in. And so that's where the vetting process comes in. We don't want MS-13 in here. When I say in here in Southern Nevada, because it's turned into a problem here, as well as Southern California, Arizona. We are dealing with the worst element on the face of this earth. So they get vetted as best we can. Now, I've had people say, well, yeah, but look at, here the government allowed these other people and flew them in on airplanes. Well, this is what I got to say to that. 2 wrongs don't make a right. It doesn't matter how they get here if it's wrong. It doesn't matter if they fly in, parachute in, or whatever. 2 wrongs do not make a right. And now we have some real problems with these gangs like MS-13. Now, the reason I talk about inherent rights, which is pretty interesting because our founding forefathers did believe that they were fulfilling certain Bible prophecies. 49th chapter of Genesis, Joseph's descendants would, it says Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches shall run over the wall. And our founding forefathers understood, well, let me finish that. It goes on a little bit further, and it says, the blessings of Joseph have prevailed above his progenitors unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. And our founding forefathers, when they first came to this country, they believed they were those that had an inherent right to this country. This is one of those things you'll never hear about, okay? And in the preamble to the Constitution, they said they were to secure those rights, those freedoms for themselves and their posterity. And they understood their posterity was descendants of Joseph. That same Joseph who was sold into Egypt. You have been quiet all day, every time I start to talk. That parakeet's got to make noise. Anyhow, yeah, this is one of those little known things that very few people understand. Now, does that mean that they didn't want anybody else coming to this country? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means they were thinking, first of all, number one, for their posterity. Because when you look at history, their posterity was run out, kicked out, destroyed virtually every single country there was. Okay? They got to the point where they were in the British Isles, and they were so oppressed and persecuted there that they understood that they had to get out and go somewhere they could start over. And I mean, you can go back through history from the very first time they left as one of the 10 tribes of the house of Israel. And they were taken captive. And they went up into the north country, taken captive by Syria. And this whole event, this migration or immigration that they were subjected to, every place they went, they had problems. Primarily from Rome, the Romans, but other people too, the Ashkenaz, from the Khazars, when they took over Europe. So what they were doing is they wanted to set up a homeland that would be free for everybody. But they understood that their posterity did come first. And they also understood once they established for their posterity, then it'd be safe for everybody because they were freedom-loving people. Point of interest is the Mormon, early church Mormon leaders understood this perfectly. And they talked about it as the inherent rights of Joseph, primarily Ephraim and Manasseh. And of course, they, in our belief system, the Native Americans were from the tribe of Manasseh. So they had that inherent right, though they have been extremely abused by this government. And they also understood the descendants of Ephraim had that inherent right. In fact, Brigham Young said the church's sole responsibility at that time was to gather the children of Ephraim, okay, for the gathering of the house of Israel in the last days. So, okay, which, by the way, most Americans, you'll be amazed how much of that blood is in most Americans. Now, again, I'm going to get back to this vetting process. We don't want gang members. We don't want mafia. I mean, I've had this put to me many times. Well, look at the Russian mafia. We let them in. Or look at the, Italian mafias. We let them in. Well, yeah, okay. Did we know they were mafia at the time? I doubt it. But again, two wrongs don't make a right. Two wrongs do not make a right. And now we're in a situation, and have been for some time, where the voting, the conservative voters, the constitutional voters, have been so watered down that they've been able to get people like Harry Reid, keep them in office. And I was here back when Harry Reid last ran for office. He was behind 7%, like the day before the election took place. And he wins it by 3%. Wow, what happened there? Well, we found out what happened there. They bus loaded all the illegals who were working at the hotels and casinos, and they had them vote as a block. And they did. They bust them all up and down the strip and other places too. They bust them to the voting booths and told them how to vote, and they did. And Harry Reid got elected again. See, that's one of the huge problems of bypassing this naturalization process, because big part of it is educational. You know, you get educated on the principles, the eternal principles found in the Constitution that have made this country as great as it is. And it really has. It's, you know, for over 200 years, this country has just been amazing for the most part. We got problems, we got issues, yes. But if you look at historically in the past, you couldn't own property, you couldn't own anything in all these countries. You had kings and judges and magistrates and dictators and tyrants that you were subjected to. And you couldn't own anything, you couldn't own property, you had no liberty, you had no freedom. But there's this great plan for the first time in the history of the world. We had a constitution that was by the people and for the people. And it has done a magnificent job for the most part. So when I look at the American flag, I look at the American flag as what it was originally intended to be. And you know what it originally represented. To me, it still represents those same things, regardless of the problems we've had. And I'll be the first to admit that we have been infiltrated with organizations such as the CIA, Council of Foreign Relations, even the FBI, that have done horrible things throughout this world, and even our presidents. Excuse me, I picked up a bug here last week. But yeah, if you look at the Middle East, these organizations that have infiltrated our government, that have done those things, as far as I'm concerned, they are not our government. They are not by the people and for the people. The CIA should be banished forever. The FBI should be banished forever. Council of Foreign Relations and any other number of illegal organizations that exist outside of this country that have been, I mean, CIA created ISIS, okay? And you have certain parts of the ISIS that is supported by the CIA, and then on the other hand, you have the CIA supporting other groups that fight with each other. And the whole idea was, you know, when you get into it, it's very interesting, but it was all about world control, world power, and that's not what we should be as a country. You know, we should never be policing the rest of the world. By the same token, don't come to this country and think that you have some inherent right that you can just walk in and do whatever you want. That is not going to happen. It doesn't even make a little bit of sense. Not even a little bit of sense. So where is the problem? Where is the difficulty in understanding this? I don't know. You know, we talk about adverse possession. In a way, this whole country has been adverse possessed, and the people that are here and born here have that inherent right to protect it from all outside sources, especially a Trojan horse. And we got people like George Soros, like that have been putting these Trojan horses together and coming into this country through the back door any way they can get. And I know for a fact, just from documentation I have seen, that there's a tremendous Muslim influence in this country that's getting out of hand. Now, a lot of people say, oh, freedom of religion, you hypocrite. Whoa, 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 whoa. I believe in freedom of religion as long as it doesn't violate our Constitution, period, end of story. And you know what? You show me how these people divide culture and values. They don't. They don't divide them. Their culture is their values. And you hear it all the time. Every time they rape and kill and pillage, oh, that's our culture. Well, too damn bad. You know what? You need to be prosecuted for your crimes or get the hell out of this country. Okay? If that's your culture, if those are your values, then you have no business being in this country, or you have all the business in the world being behind bars. Now, I want to address, that's one thing I'd like to address. You have people standing up and saying, I'm Muslim, and I have freedom of religion in this country. Well, what part of that Quran are you talking about? Because you got good parts and you got evil parts, okay? So you need to qualify what you're saying. And I don't know how you can actually divide it like that. It either is or isn't, all right? So if you say you're a Muslim, then you believe in Islam. If you believe in Islam, you believe in the Quran, and you believe in Sharia law. It's an ideology that the Nation of Islam embraces. So how hard is that to understand? If you come up to me and say, I'm a Muslim, I'm a nice Muslim, I'm going to look at you cross-eyed. You need to change your name, okay? If that's your belief system, then, hey, get out of here. Either that or, you know, if you try to act it out, which all belief systems, all ideologies eventually act out. That's what they believe in. I don't care what your belief system is. I like Hindus and Confucianism because they're very peaceful for the most part. Christians, very peaceful for the most part. They believe in loving their fellow man as they love them, you know, as they love themselves. They don't believe in converting everybody. And if you don't get converted, we're going to kill you. They don't believe in that. So how can you compare the two? You can't. You're comparing apples to oranges. If you try to compare the Nation of Islam and the Quran to the Bible and Christians, that's ridiculous. It's stupid. And of course, somebody's always going to come out and say, well, look what they did in the Old Testament. Oh, they were just as violent. Hey, you know what the key word there is? Old. Old Testament. Okay? Christ himself came and fulfilled that law. And what did he say? Basically, he said the end no longer justifies the means because he left the 99 to go find the one. All right? He said, love your fellow man as you love yourself. The golden rule found in Matthew. So, the New Testament is entirely different. In fact, in many cases, I just like to ignore a big part of the Old Testament. All right? because it's old, it's outdated, Christ fulfilled it, it's gone. The historical aspects of it and some of those things I love. Okay? So, anyhow, I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me on Facebook or whatever. So, I hope this is educational. I want to say to those people that have disagreed with me, you know what? You're still my friends. I really, if you got a different opinion than me, so be it. That's okay. It's just that I will do all I can to institute the Constitution of the United States. And all of the principles that are in there, because they are eternal principles. And they have, principles of freedom and slavery are eternal. They don't change. All this stuff about a living document, baloney. No. Those principles found in the Constitution are eternal in nature. They do not change. Okay, thank you.